Hey everyone, and welcome to What Did I Miss?, where today I'll be breaking down all the Easter eggs and things that you may have missed while watching the 4th episode of the 4th season of Star Trek Discovery, titled All Is Possible. This episode dealt with characters moving on with their lives past experiences that continue to affect their decision making and their ability to relate to others. The allegory, of course, being that many viewers feel isolated by the events of the past 2 years and are finding it difficult to reassimilate into society and make connections with people again. The influence of socio-political issues can also jade people into behaving towards others a certain way, and this episode tries to show that even still, people can move forward and work together, and that all is possible when this occurs. The episode also served as a spiritual successor to many Star Trek Shuttle accident episodes, specifically one from the original series, and said farewell to one of the most talked about characters on the show. But before I get into it, don't forget to leave a like on the video if you enjoy the content, and if this is your first time visiting the channel, please subscribe. If there's one type of episode that Star Trek is most known for, it may be the shuttle crash, and I believe that each addition to the franchise has at least one episode in which 2 or more crew members are stranded on a desolate planet due to this type of MacGuffin. 2 of my personal favorites have to be the Next Generation episode Final Mission that saw Captain Picard and Wesley stranded together, as well as the Deep Space Nine episode The Ascent that paired Odo and Quark together in a life or death situation. But this episode of Discovery specifically references the original series episode The Galileo 7, in which Spock led a team in a shuttlecraft to study a quasar that crash lands on a nearby planet. Besides Spock and Tilly both being science officers and leading their respective teams, one crew member also dies in both episodes, and in both the crew are chased by monstrous creatures whose appearance is precipitated by a massive roar. Director John Ottman confirmed in a recent interview that all these connections are intentional, which makes this episode a love letter to the original series episode that was also the first to introduce the shuttlecraft to the lore of Star Trek. So far this season, Star Trek Discovery has really leaned heavily on the nostalgia of the franchise. For instance, the first episode of the season being named Kobayashi Maru, a well-known part of Star Trek history. Then the second episode is titled Anomaly, which is also the name of an episode from the Star Trek Enterprise series. And the last episode, Choose to Live, is the catchphrase of one of the main characters on Picard. Since we have not had a Voyager-centric episode yet, I would expect the 5th episode of the season to be about the Borg or coffee or something. But seriously, do you think this is too much fan service, or do you appreciate Discovery leaning so hard on the history of the franchise? Let me know in the comments. This episode begins with the Discovery still in orbit of Navarre, as negotiations between them and the Federation are still ongoing. As the different members of the crew are shown, we see Tilly looking at a star globe with an NX-1 style craft within it. It is easy to forget that this crew started out in a time before the original series, so they would only recognize and be nostalgic about ships from before their time period, like the NX-1. This was the same style of ship of the Enterprise, captained by Jonathan Archer on the series Enterprise, which took place about 100 years before Discovery's first season. Also at the Discovery bar that was first featured in the last episode, we see Lieutenant Linus, who has been absent since last season. He is Saurian, a species first introduced in the background of the original motion picture. This episode also features another member of his race as part of the Federation Council. I mentioned this in my video about the last episode, but the Ferengi bartender is once again shown briefly in this scene, and they are no doubt a reference to Star Trek's most famous barkeep, Quark, from Deep Space Nine. After Burnham and Saru are called to be a part of the negotiations with Navarre, Tilly meets with Dr. Culber for a counseling session. Tilly is still having trouble with her place on the ship, and I think now that Saru is back on Discovery that her role has really been marginalized. Dr. Culber decides to send her on a training mission with cadets from Starfleet Academy and asks that she take Adira along. Adira is less than enthusiastic about being added to the mission, but Gray remarks that they think Starfleet Academy is awesome. I think this confirms that even though the symbiont is within Adira and not Gray, that Gray still retains the memories of his prior hosts, of which 4 had been Starfleet officers. At Starfleet Academy, Tilly and Adira meet Dr. Kovich, who is played by filmmaker David Cronenberg and who returns from last season. It is still unclear of what type of Dr. Kovich is or what his role in the organization is, but he obviously has no interest in political influence like Admiral Vance and President Rilak do. Many people believe that he is a part of a covert organization such as Section 31, and placing him at Starfleet Academy would allow him to find new recruits early in their careers. There have been hints that a new series centered around Starfleet Academy could possibly be greenlit in the near future, and staging characters like Kovich and Tilly there would allow them to return for the series. Tilly leaves on the mission with her team that includes another human cadet, as well as a Tellarite cadet and an Orion cadet. The Tellarite cadet looks like a version of the species similar to that of the animated Tellarite Jacob Pog on the new series Star Trek Prodigy. The Tellarite are one species that has changed their look many times since they were first introduced on the original series. The shuttle is hit by a gamma ray burst and crashes, killing the pilot. I always thought it was a funny in-joke that Starfleet cadets had red in their uniforms, given the red shirt memes that they are always the first to die on away missions. But a study was conducted about the original series that found you are more likely to die on an away mission if you wore gold, not red. While it is true that more crew members who wore red shirts were seen killed on away missions, there were also more that went on those missions. If you notice, the crewman who dies in this scene is also wearing a gold uniform, as was the crewman who died in the original series episode, the Galileo 7. After the crash, the crew decipher that they have not landed on the moon they intended to, and that the moon they are on is an L-class moon. This was the same type of atmosphere that was present on the planet that Odo and Quark landed on in the Deep Space Nine episode The Ascent, about them being stranded together. Cadet Harral believes that this is a training simulation and not real. We have seen before that Starfleet will put cadets through simulations that they believe are real but are in fact a simulation, such as the one shown during the short trek Ask Not, in which a crewman was meant to believe that Captain Pike was a prisoner charged with mutiny. As the cadets introduce themselves, Cadet Sasha states that she is from the Titan colony and never saw an alien before she entered the Academy. Last season on Discovery, during the events of the episode People of Earth, we learned that colonies like Titan cut themselves off from Earth after the burn, and Saru helped them agree to a truce. The colony was known for being entirely self-sufficient, which is why Sasha never saw anyone from another planet. Cadet Harral states that he has to work twice as hard to be taken seriously as an Orion, and this echoes similar statements that Ensign Tendi, an Orion officer serving on the USS Cerritos, has said about her race on the series' lower decks. Given the role of the Admiral Chain in the post-burn universe, it appears that Harral will have an even harder job gaining respect than Tendi did during her time. At the negotiations, the president of Navarre, Turina, states that Navarre cannot rejoin the Federation without an amendment. The Vulcans are known to make these types of last-minute negotiations, and it really reminded me of Ambassador Soval and the relationship between Vulcan and Earth on the series Star Trek Enterprise. Captain Archer held a long-standing prejudice against Vulcan because of how their actions affected the progress of Earth's space program. In the middle of all of this, there's a great character scene between Booker and Dr. Culber concerning Booker's healing over the loss of his planet Kwejian. I think that both David Ayala and Wilson Cruz are both killing it this season in their roles, and you can tell that the writers are finding ways to inject them into each episode because of how good they both are. I wouldn't be surprised if either or both are nominated for some awards based on their performances. Another great one-on-one scene occurs between Saru and President Turina as they discuss each other's interests, and I think that Doug Jones is establishing Saru as one of the most interesting and unique characters to date. I think that his budding relationship with the leader of Navarre will be a major plot point going forward, and I wouldn't put it past the president of the Federation to try and use this relationship to her advantage. Tilly and the cadets are able to save Adira from some ice that looks like quicksand, which I thought was pretty cool. After the cadets air their grievances, they're able to find some common ground, which is also what occurs between the Federation president and the president of Navarre before Navarre agrees to rejoin the Federation. Saru even speaks about how his people, the Kelpians, had difficulty coexisting with the Ba'ul, but that now they are stronger together. While Discovery sometimes receives heavy phaser fire from people for being too preachy, I think this is a great message about coming together through communication and compromise, and it rounds out a very good episode. Burnham proposes a committee be created to review member worlds' needs and that she represent a bridge between Navarre and the Federation while serving on this committee. On the ice moon Hoth, Tilly draws the attention of the ice monsters before she and the cadets are eventually rescued. They return to Starfleet Academy and Tilly is offered a teaching position there by Kovich. This signals the end of her time on the ship, and she shares a tender moment with Burnham while they remember their experiences as bunkmates in the first and second seasons. During their discussion, Tilly mentions that her mother wanted her to follow her and become part of the diplomatic corps. They are a body of the Federation, similar to Starfleet, that was responsible for negotiating with other governing bodies, and was first mentioned in the movie Star Trek The Undiscovered Country as being present at the Khitomer Conference. Tilly passes the proverbial torch to Adira as she gives Adira her star globe and leaves the ship. Well, that was everything I saw, but let me know in the comments if I missed anything. Thank you very much for clicking on this video. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time on What Did I Miss?